Welcome to Understandable Insights, Information to Intelligence with Sue Gordon, the national security podcast that provides you an elemental understanding of the world as it is, not how you prefer it to be. I'm Eric, joined each week by the Honorable Sue Gordon, and together we'll break down the headlines shaping our world and ask how we should be thinking and acting as citizens and leaders across issues in intelligence, technology, and business. It's December 29th, 2025. Let's get to it. Hey, Sue, how are you?
I'm great, Eric. I am feeling very bouncy. I love our, for those of you who are going to see us on YouTube, we're very matchy today.
That's right. Hook 'em.
Yeah.
I got a Longhorn swag on.
Yeah. I got to work on just like the hook 'em and saying it like naturally.
Yeah, it'll come.
Yeah.
It'll come.
There we go. All right. What should we talk about? Christmas just passed.
Yep.
Favorite holiday moment, kind of writ large.
I think best and worst are the same for me. So Christmas morning at just before 4, about 3:55, the oldest came bounding into our room and announced that Santa Claus had come and was really excited. And I was like, oh, that's awesome. He was so excited and truly believes, and did not want to go to sleep after that. So every 5 to 6 minutes after that was like, is it 5 o'clock yet? Can we wake up? Is it 5 o'clock yet? Can we wake up? Nobody. It's only 4:15. It's only 4:20. That mix of excitement and joy and just the kids loving Christmas and it was a lot of fun. But also it's a lot of work because they go crazy.
Yeah. Oh God. I was just as you were talking about that, I go back to my youth. I remember same thing, right? Brother, sister, and I, we had to sit on the stairs waiting while mom and dad took like an interminable time, I don't know if Santa came, and they're just puttering around, taking the dog out for a walk, getting breakfast.
And enjoying their coffee.
Yeah, we're like, right. And the other thing I remember is we had a ship's clock in our house. Of course we did. Dad was in the Navy. There are bells every 4 hours. There are 2 bells on each of the hours. And I remember when I was probably 6, and I decided that I would be in charge of getting us up, and I waited to hear the bells in the morning, and 6 o'clock was kind of the time that our parents said we could come out there.
Yeah.
2 o'clock is also the same number of bells as 6 as 6 o'clock is. So I did the oldest, but this time it was the youngest, come back into the room, woke everybody up, said it was time. And it didn't matter if I was going to go back to sleep. I was not allowed to go forward. So I love that.
That's funny.
My favorite, I'm going to choose candlelight service with 5-year-old grandson being very fastidious about his appearance, and he shows up with massive amounts of product in his hair. And he was so proud, right? It was going to church.
Yeah.
It was looking good. He was going to be dapper, but
Dapper Dan, man.
It was like Crisco in his hair. It was fantastic. it was fantastic. I don't know. It was just kind of that growing up moment. One, the service was beautiful, and being with the family and candlelight service and all that kind of stuff.
Yeah.
And no one set the church on fire, but it was
Nice.
it was the amount of product. All right, my next question is New Year's coming up. Are you a resolution guy or not? Resolution, yes or no?
Yeah, I always try to set a resolution. I think more important is to reflect on the year and what your intentions are for the following year. And I think that end of the year is a good time. Some people choose their birthday, right, to look at what they want to accomplish in the next year. But for me, it's going to be to not park like an asshole. So a lot of times I pull into a parking space and I get out and I'm all crookedy or take up a big chunk of it. I'm going to be really intentional about parking in the lines.
Well, and you have a Suburban, so if
Yep. Sometimes it's the big car, sometimes it's the little car, and I get all wonky. So I'm going to be more deliberate about being a good steward of the parking space.
Wow.
How about you?
In general, I'm not a big resolution person because I tend to. I'm so hyper self-critical that I'm always kind of reflecting on almost on a minute by minute basis what I need to do. I do a lot of it overnight. Like if a day was great or not so great, I'll plan and I'll be resolved at what I'm gonna do the next day to make it better. So I will say I have 2, maybe 3 this year though. One is to diversify my wardrobes. Today was a big start because
Yeah, yeah,
I'm
yeah.
wearing, rust so that I don't always have on blue, black, or white. So that's one, is just to be a little more interesting from an attire perspective. 2 is and you and I will maybe talk about this later at the end. I have really been excited about what we've done with Understandable Insights this year, but I think there's more we can do. And so, taking these what is this, episode 24? Taking
24.
yeah, the 24 sets of experiences we have and saying, "Okay, where do we wanna go with this now?" 'Cause I don't think I don't think everything's so clear that there's not contribution we can make, but I think there's some interesting ways we can go. And then the
Yeah.
3rd one is just a physical one, and I'm gonna give myself an entire year, but I really wanna I don't know, since 2017 when I, in a surgical mishap, lost some function in my right leg through really being really busy and then losing gym and then getting cancer. My physicality is super important part of my identity, and I've kind of turned into a
Mhm.
slug, so I'm giving myself a year with the progress we've made against the cancer that I'm going to recapture significant parts of the girl of my youth over the next year and
Nice.
be closer to the physicality that I identify with myself. So, for a non-resolution person, I just made 3.
Yeah, well, those are all specific, measurable, time bound, realistic, you know? It's good smart goals.
And now we have a whole bunch of people that can hold us accountable.
That's right.
No one's gonna only you are gonna everyone is gonna be able to tell whether I did what I said, but only you will know if you continue to be a parking asshole or not.
That's true. Maybe I need a Russian dash cam
Yeah.
and then put that feed up of my crookedy parketing.
Yeah, there
All
you
right.
go. Let's get to work.
All right. From dogfighting satellites to a new NASA boss and missile defense constellations, space is going from frontier to battlefield and critical infrastructure fast. Russia floods the skies with drones and missiles. President Zelensky just takes his pitch for peace straight to Mar-a-Lago, and the next phase may hinge on security guarantees and a national referendum. The U.S. reignited the Greenland fight, naming a Join the U.S. envoy in what looks like a Trump corollary to the Monroe Doctrine. Is this smart Arctic strategy or a self-inflicted crisis with a NATO ally? The administration just froze 5 offshore wind projects over radar clutter. But is this a real national security fix or a modern Don Quixote moment where we're fighting windmills and citing everything as national security?
Wow.
So we'll start with space. In a new analysis arguing that low Earth orbit, or LEO, has become a quote house of cards because satellite mega-constellations now experience frequent close passes, a close approach defined as 2 satellites passing by at less than 1 kilometer of separation. Using this quote crash clock metric that these analysts developed, they estimate that if operators lost maneuver control, a catastrophic collision could occur roughly 2.8 days. This is down from roughly 121 days in 2018. And even a 24-hour loss of control carries about a 30% chance of a major collision that could kick off a Kessler syndrome debris cascade. For Starlink alone, that number is about every 11 minutes that they have a close call. And another metric for Starlink is that each of their thousands of satellites has to perform 41 maneuvers per year to avoid running into other objects in their orbit. So we've talked about space as a form of infrastructure before and the need for a better traffic collision and traffic management system, but this kind of puts some numbers on it. Is this time for us to act?
I'm so glad you said the word time. I think it is such an interesting construct where we keep thinking about congestion and space traffic management. The real issue is time. It's just
Hmm.
moving so fast, the decisions that need to be made are distributed across many stakeholders, and they happen in time frames that you actually, I can imagine, can't have a human involvement, and so it's gonna be algorithms making the decisions, and these are untested, unproven across it, so, we're moving from space being a domain to space being a dependency, and then within the
Mm,
environment itself, there are a lot of dependencies on what everyone does, so it's absolutely time to act, although the action is hard to imagine how we're gonna get there from where we are because we love building things. We really
mhm.
do. We love technology. We love capability, but we really lag in terms of governance and regulation and policy, particularly across stakeholders that are in completely different silos of how we act singularly as a nation, right? And we're really proud of the separation between government and the private sector. That is becoming problematic with space as well. So, absolutely time to act, but we need to think about it differently than avoiding collisions, and that is how are we going to coordinate a massively used space such that decisions can be made in a time frame that keeps the crisis that you articulated from happening. So, we're not yet focusing on that. And so it's certainly the time to, but I'm not sure that just space management itself is gonna be enough. It's gotta be kind of policies and hierarchies, and then what are the algorithms governing it, and who's the one that's validating, and what are the rules of who gets precedence. And this is just when it's a benign environment. When you start being concerned that people are going to be acting aggressively in that space, again, who are you allowing to make the decisions about how you avoid accident. So certainly time to act, but we need to act from a decision-making perspective rather than from just a management perspective.
It seems like the technology is either there or we're right on the precipice using AI to help manage some of this deconfliction. That's one of the big advocacies for future self-driving cars, using the computers for traffic management and rerouting. You're going to have considerably safer environment because the computers are controlling it, and also traffic management, deciding routes and congestion. But to your point of priorities, right? Everybody's going to be fighting for the
Right.
space. It's a big space, um, but you're fighting for priority location over the equator, and Starlink fighting against Amazon for ability to provide their services, right? You're soon going to wind up with competition, not just in the military and
Right.
national security domain, but the commercial domain, and setting those priorities and who gets that real estate.
Right, now we're coming to the point that there just isn't a line. So right now you said it, you're right, you've got Amazon's Kuiper, Starlink, OneWeb, Eutelsat, and infinite more up there that are
Hmm.
commercial systems. All in, there are bands of where the activity is, but there are also military systems in there, and so I think we're still holding on to this separation between commercial, civil, and military, and if this is gonna work, and I agree with you, self-driving cars are gonna have many, many fewer accidents than human-driven cars are gonna be, but look how much time it's taking to get there, and we
Sure.
have all these roads mapped. And we have laws that govern how who has right of way and how things happen, and so you're right that technology is there. I'm just not sure we've done the work to have all the parameters of decision making that will make that technology have the same near-term potential that the self-driving cars do, and I'm a self-driving car fan. I love me a Waymo through Uber. I do.
I haven't done it yet.
I do,
Yeah,
it's
it's
great. We can get to this as a much bigger topic about AI in general, but it's not about the action, it's about the accountability. And
sure.
I think we're really far away in space from having that sorted. So to your initial question, what's it time for? It's time for us to be serious about our space policy, space governance, and interaction between military, civilian, and commercial.
Well, someone who helps set that policy between the government and the civilian is the new NASA administrator.
Yep.
So, billionaire entrepreneur and private astronaut Isaacman was just confirmed by the Senate in a 67-30 vote. He's a SpaceX veteran who has flown on missions like Inspiration 4 and Polaris Dawn, And his appointment was previously rescinded for a bit during the Musk Trump fallout because his affiliation with SpaceX, the administration pulled his nomination, but he's back in and been confirmed. He's a bit controversial in part because of his ties to Elon Musk and SpaceX and their massive role in future NASA contracts. But he said he'll avoid conflicts as he pushes a more commercial, get results approach. So, some of his near term ambitions get Artemis moving. He's emphasized the urgency around getting Artemis 2 on the launch pad and keeping our track back to the moon on timeline. He's doing a big bet on nuclear propulsion. So he's explicitly advocated ramping urgency and investment in nuclear electric thermal propulsion as a kind of near impossible work that NASA should lead. Wants to make NASA flatter, less bureaucracy, more doers. Got it. Science, keep it, but make it cheaper and faster. He's described a push towards more frequent, lower cost missions, greater use of commercial services when possible, and a willingness to accept more risk on uncrewed efforts to keep schedule and budget. And finally, a bigger space economy goal. He's talked about NASA helping industry scale low Earth orbit, LEO commercialization, with ISS as a bridge for commercial stations, and then handing off mature capabilities to the private sector once NASA approves them. So, what do you think about Isaacman's appointment here or confirmation here and some of the vision for NASA 2026?
Not a personal commentary. I think his biggest job is to figure out what lane NASA's gonna be in, right? What's its role gonna be? What's his vision for it? So I think it's a much bigger question than all the small things that he said. And then as you listed his set of visions and accomplishments, it's a little bit the same thing I have every time Trump speaks. I wanna just yell at the screen to say what's new to you is not necessarily new. There isn't a single thing on his list that NASA hasn't been working at. You wanna know who's done a good job with using the commercial sector for real accomplishments? It's NASA, far better than the national security community has done. So the national security has a really hard time imagining how they give actual requirements and let the competitive forces work on them. It's having a hard time, but NASA has done that really well. The International Space Station has already proven an exemplar of how you can have infrastructure in space. And there are companies from Sierra Space to others who have recognized that space can be the infrastructure for human activities on Earth, and space stations are a way to go. So almost everything on his list. So to make NASA flatter, less bureaucracy and more doers, yay. Do you know how you get that? It's a combination of quest and dollars, right? So a really clear vision of what you're gonna do. These are all activities rather than outcomes that you wanna have. What is NASA gonna be? And then you gotta resource it. And if you've got great quests and you have great resourcing, talent will follow that. So
Mhm.
so I don't know, what are you gonna do? Just, say faster, faster to the people that are already there, or you have to do something structurally much more interesting in order to get the things you want. So these are all fine things. None of them are new. Every one of his predecessors have tried them. That they still need to be done means that I think there's a different job that he has, which is what's NASA gonna be with the advent of commercial, with how busy space is. Even the question of, nuclear power in space. I don't know. Tell me more about why we need that. The Russians had a nuclear powered satellite back in the '80s, and while power and space is always an issue for spacecraft, it doesn't feel like our missions are failing because we can't power them. And so why is that an imperative for NASA? They're all fine, and none of them will be enough if he hasn't defined what NASA is going to be. What lane do they have? How important is civil space? I think those are his big questions, and if he can do that and make it compelling, all these other things will tend to follow behind.
What role would you have it play? Would you have him as an integrator, as an inventor?
I'd have him as inventor science. I happen to love exploration, what we learn when we go further out, when we live in the environment, when we see what the environment can do. Listen, so much of what we can imagine doing in terms of pharmaceuticals with the advantages of zero gravity comes from what NASA did with human exploration and the experiments they did on the space station and the shuttle. So, having presence and pushing the boundaries and understanding the environment, I think, is not just noble, but it has turned out to be the way you get real use advantage. If everyone is near in, right?
Mhm.
Then you just tend to not get the next. And so I like NASA as our explorers with an idea of what we still need to understand in order to advance the quality of human activity.
Nice. Yeah, a lot of folks are comparing him to Dan Golden,
Mhm.
Daniel S.
Yeah.
Golden, back in
Great
1992.
good
He
guy.
also came from a commercial background and widely seen as an industry outsider to come in and shake up Nash's culture. Best known for pushing faster, better, cheaper philosophy.
Dan did a lot of things, and he did a number of things in terms of being a real voice for all the participants that needed to be in space and not being just so wedded to the national security complex that their primacy of the domain carried everything. He was a real advocate in terms of how we deconflicted GPS and frequencies and things like that. So if he were a Dan Golden who thought about the practicality of the integration between what we need to do from civilian space and in the other ones to keep a counterbalance to the national security needs, I think that could be awesome. I don't think he quite has the pedigree that Dan had coming out of TRW, so I'm not sure what particular expertise he has in the business of managing large institutions and effectively creating cultural and organizational change. But I think Dan did show as a NASA administrator that was primarily a doer, right? An industrial doer. He did come in and he did introduce that expertise into what had historically been a very scientific culture, and I think it had great effect. I don't know that this administrator has quite the same heft of experience. He is the new NASA administrator. He owns that space. The president has said, and we'll talk a little bit about that in terms of this new age of space achievement. I
Yeah.
would just want him to say, okay, then what does NASA need to be? Because NASA owns some space. What does it need to be in order to be a facilitator of that? And I think he needs to be the one who articulates that and then builds to it, not just says, I'm gonna doge NASA, which is a fine thing, but only a good thing to do after you know what it's trying to become.
Yeah. Go get him.
Yeah.
You can do it.
I think I would have loved to have been the NASA administrator.
Seems like a cool job.
Yeah, totally, right? What a great heritage, what great smarts behind it, and what a great opportunity for the reasons that we've set up this segment is and it is not just a nerdy space for futuristic play. I mean, this is
Mhm.
this is real infrastructure support. What a fun time.
Yep. And to validate some new
Yep,
technologies and push them over to the commercial sector.
yep.
Yeah. I
Yeah.
think it's a It'd be awesome. You mentioned the space policy or the space plan. There was an executive order December 18th called Ensuring American Space Superiority. It's a bill as an America First space agenda, keeps the U.S. leading in exploration. Some of the big milestones it highlighted were the return of Americans to the moon by 2028. I think we're planning on doing a manned loop around the moon later this year or next year, 2026. Start building the first elements of a permanent lunar outpost by 2030. Deploy nuclear reactors to the moon, including the lunar surface reactor, ready for launch by 2030. And on the security side, it's calling for improved ability to detect and counter threats from the very low Earth orbit and for prototype next gen missile defense technologies by 2028. And it explicitly leans into this, again, Jared Isaacman's style priorities of more commercial participation, including pathways to replace ISS by 2030, and a target for attracting 50 billion in additional private investment by 2028, with White House science tech leadership coordinating implementation and procurement streamlining.
I'm gonna be in the same place I have been with a lot of the other things the administration has put out. I think there are goodness in articulating our intention, and I think the narrative does signal confidence to allies and markets that commercial scale and national purpose align.
Yeah.
I think that's fundamentally a good thing, and particularly markets are really looking for a signal that the government is going to be a reliable partner that is going to year over year put resources behind it and is gonna provide a signal of what they need to produce. I mean, that's how this engine works, right? Big quests. That's the way it's supposed to go. I mean, so this is good. I think the narrative signals that. And I'm gonna be a broken record on this. The governance and coordination lag behind technical achievement. And let's just take the issue of I don't know if we're gonna talk about the dogfighting in space, but it's mentioned in the space achievement in terms of,
Hmm.
understanding the situation and being kind of threat awareness. Okay, tell me how that's gonna work, right? You Everyone is building inspectors and everyone is building offensive capabilities. How do you determine the difference between an inspector and an actor? When do you act? What's the authority? Can you act on only nationally flagged assets? Can you go against commercial? So I like that the narrative is signaling that this is where we're going with enough specificity to imagine what people can build against and what allies and partners can say, "We can provide that capability to you." I guess I'm exhausted with the potential of technology that we never create a snowball effect, that it turns into an outcome that is fundamentally different. So, I would hope that what follows the White House, new age of space achievement is a set of actions that are gonna get us to actually have the ability to work together. Because if you don't, there are kind of 3 misses you can do. One, you can have technology that's almost right because you didn't articulate the requirements. You can have technology that never gets into use because it doesn't have the ecosystem around it. Because what people tend to build is the thing that goes into it and somehow expecting that the whole ecosystem of launch surveillance, communications, governance, deconfliction is going to be constructed for them. I think what I would have in all of these sessions say what you need to look for next if it's really gonna make a difference is starting to see work on space policy, space
Hmm.
governance to go along with the technical articulation of what capabilities we need.
Yeah, it almost seems like getting the nuclear reactors to the moon is going to be some form of trickle down science, right? We did this, and now what other applications can we apply it to, or what springboard can we do? Versus the real policy that needs to be done is the deconfliction of the satellites.
Yeah, and as far as moon basing goes, I mean, returning to the moon is a great thing. I think there's probably an overblown assessment of the value of what the assets on the moon are, and I don't know that we've articulated why we need a presence on the moon, how that is a better outposting than on-orbit outpost based on the technologies that are available. So, again, I feel like at the end of the year, I'm sounding like a broken record where we keep on saying the things we wanna do rather than the outcomes that we're trying to achieve,
Hmm.
right? What is the point of an outpost on the moon? And I fear, and again, with this administration, I think that there's decent reason to fear it, that activities will be more symbolic than resultant.
Hmm.
And so I think, again, things to look for, start hearing a national dialogue about the importance of that to human activities, to national imperatives, not just it's important that we own space, it's important that we do it so that we can achieve this other purpose. So watch for that.
Yep, I think it's good. Other thing we wanted to call out was that Rocket Labs
Yeah.
had just been awarded $816 million Space Force contract from the Space Development Agency to design and build 18 satellites for the Tracking Layer Tranche 3 of the Proliferated Warfighter Space Architecture. The company says that the spacecraft will carry missile warning tracking sensors aimed at providing persistent global tracking of advanced threats, including hypersonic systems. They also highlight that it's going to use Starlight space protection sensors to harden the constellation against directed energy threats and notes it may supply subsystems to other primes,
Yeah.
pushing the value of this contract upwards of $1 billion.
Yeah.
dollars. So, what do you think about this new player in the orbital game?
Well, it certainly fits what this administration has been pushing for, and I think actually everyone's pushing for is we have had such a great historical dependence on the big primes, the Lockheed Martins, the Northrop Grumman's, the Boeings, and before that, Martin Marietta's, and a whole bunch of folks who provided amazing capability. But everyone knows that when you've been doing something for a long time, you become your own entrenched bureaucracy and tend to do it the same way. And what's really exciting about this moment, kind of in terms of national defense technology, is there are so many entrants in the commercial space that have really good ideas and access to the technology that can make a contribution. So that's good news. And it's a push of this administration to bring more of those people in. It has been a push of several, but they seem to be really taking it to a new level. I like that. It's interesting the choice of Rocket Lab. They're much more known as a launch company. And so it's an interesting question about what's the foundation that they're going to have in order to be able to deliver these capabilities in this time frame, who they're going to have to partner with. And it's a little bit
Mhm.
like what you see out of the Andrils and other new players that tend to have not been in the business, but because technology is so abundant, they're able to put a proposal forward of doing something differently. So I think it's cool enough. The only worry I have with new entrants into the market is there is a difference between what is commercially acceptable and commercial failures and what is national security acceptable to national security failures. And sometimes getting those two things to meet where you get the benefit of update speed, availability that comes with commercial, with the reliability and assurance that you wanna have in national security systems. And so sometimes when you have a new entrant, especially with something like a missile defense layer, especially
Mhm.
that it's gonna try and interact with Golden Dome, there will be a lot of learning that has to go on. And so again, just things to watch is, are the contracts on time? Who they're partnering with to be able to do it. So I like that they said, "We think we can be a provider of subsystems to other mission areas." That's great. We ought to reuse that all the time. That's one of the best ideas of new approach to acquisition is stop making everything we develop being a closed system unto itself. So a lot of
Yeah.
good things to like, but there's some risk here because it's a niche-y space trying to satisfy trying to satisfy national security requirements, but good luck to Rocket Labs. They've certainly proven an incredibly worthy launch partner. I'm gonna believe that not only they and their proposals, but the MDA knew what they were doing.
And we do need the resilience
Right.
and the
We
defensive
do.
capability because the US and China military linked satellites are increasingly, this article I'm going to talk about next calls it dogfighting in
Yeah.
orbit, closing distance, changing speed, and jockeying for position to gain surveillance or tactical advantage. So the Washington Post had this article. They recreated a notable 2022 encounter where the US patrol satellite USA 270 was approached by two Chinese satellites, the Xi'an 12 Tech 01 and 12 Tech 02, and the Chinese craft counter-maneuvered. At one point, they reversed who was tailing and who was in front, and the Top Gun style, hit the brakes and they'll fly right by. The article argues it's a shift from traditionally parked satellites to
Yeah.
more maneuverable, refuelable, and potentially swarming spacecraft. Again, this comes back to our congestion and raising the risks of miscalculation as competition. People are jockeying for that specific terrain, whether it's for surveillance or for
Yeah.
communications, and how that escalates. So what was your reaction to hit the brakes and they'll fly right by?
Uh, just it's a great visual. Eh, eh, it's a little bit
Of course, these movements take like days
yeah, I
to
was
play
gonna
out,
say
right?
it's a
So,
little bit different in space, and, the movie wouldn't be quite so good because you don't have any sound. All those things would be happening, and you wouldn't get any, crazy sounds,
nice.
but I know that was nerdy. Just a couple things, it's happening. I do think that inspection is kind of a new gray zone of space warfare. To remind the audience, when people say gray zone, what they really mean is space that is ungoverned by policy or norms. right?
Mhm.
And adversaries and competitors move into that space because they can operate more freely because the consequence is not as determined. And I would say that inspection in space is one of those gray zones that'll be interesting to see how the international arena decides that it is going to establish the policies and norms around that. Right now, there's a norm on how close you can get to it, but again, where's the governance around that? And again, since so
Mhm.
many of these things are gonna be governed by algorithms, not by a human, I think you really have to have the rules in place. So I think that's one, and I the other thing I think is that most of the action's not gonna be kinetic. So
Mhm.
even when you go to dogfighting, you're gonna go to jamming and dazzling and denying much more than you are gonna be any sort of asteroids type game of blowing things out of the sky. But we're there, right? As you just
Mhm.
said, people are demonstrating it. It's why we have a space force is because that's a more active type of space management and decision making and red versus blue. But I think once again, the technology, the building has beaten the understanding. And now we're kind of racing to catch up and kind of going with our time theme of space that we introduced at the beginning. We are racing to catch up with policy to go with the capability that is just so much faster into action than we are in understanding how it can be governed.
Well, if you develop the governance, you have the enforcement, and is the Space Force the enforcement then?
Well, that's the part of it, right?
Yeah.
I mean, great question, but that's it, right? We don't know. And so the issue is gonna come, and I think cyber just is a really good stalking horse for how hard this is. You have commanders that have cyber capabilities that they don't have the authority to use because we don't have the policy around it. You're gonna see that in spades in space because look how long cyber has been part of our warfighting capability.
Yeah.
So, something to watch for, and again, yay capability, but we've got this mismatch between how fast technology's been introduced and how slow we are. Algorithms are catching up, but not the human machine interaction that I think we will want to be necessary when you decide on action against an adversary.
Let's go NASA.
That well, what yeah. What a fun time, though, because it's not the super secret world that I started in when it came to space capabilities. This is all gonna play out. Right?
Mhm.
The average bear can participate in space. You can track objects, you can task imagers. Commercial images are now flipping their cameras around and taking pictures of other on-orbit assets. So this is all playing out in plain view,
Mhm.
and so we'll be able to see whether these doctrinal issues are being addressed. We haven't had big collisions in space so far. I don't think that should give us confidence that it's not right around the corner.
Right. Yeah. I mean, it's getting congested.
Yep.
The more and more stuff we throw up there. But another topic we've been talking about for a while is Russia Ukraine and some new developments there. Russia's intensified its long range missile and drone attacks over the past few days, repeatedly damaging energy infrastructure. ABC News, citing Ukrainian Air Force data it analyzed, said that the past week's barrages total at least 1,810 drones and missiles. This comes as Ukrainian President Vladimir Zelensky met President Trump at Mar-a-Lago on December 28th, with both sides signaling they're, quote, closer on a peace framework, and Zelensky emphasizing binding security guarantees. There's talk of a 15-year security peace guarantee. We're down to a 20-point peace plan, and unlike some previous meetings, Trump praised Zelensky and remained confident that peace was near. There are still some very thorny issues. The biggest unresolved issue remains the territory, especially in the Donbass, and
Uh-huh.
the structure of any ceasefire and demilitarized zone. Zelensky has demonstrated a little bit of flexibility, saying he's willing to put a peace agreement up for referendum that falls under Ukraine's constitution to require any change to its national boundaries to be put up to a national vote, which is a new movement on their side. Talks are expected to continue into early January. So what do you think about these recent developments?
I think dialogue is always hopeful. I think that Zelensky and Trump saying roughly the same things and not having one or the other stomp out to their own separate conference where they say
Or
something,
yelling? Yeah.
is good. A concrete peace plan is a necessary step. Security guarantees are absolutely a huge thing, and the kind of coalescing of Europe around supporting Zelensky in Ukraine helps with those security guarantees because I'm quite confident that the US isn't gonna wanna be holding the bag for much of it, and so I think there are good signs of progress. I think it's probably less about a near-term peace plan than it is resetting leverage and narrative control, so that's one, is getting everyone kind of the same language. But the the real issue is there is nothing in Putin's activities that suggests that he is going to be a reliable partner in this. And just look at what he does when there's been signaling that are gonna be police dialogues. He launches massive attacks. He does this
Right.
every time. So, forgive me if I'm not massively confident when President Trump says that he's had conversations with Putin that where Putin says, he can work with this. Yeah, it depends on what pieces of it he can't work with, and if he's still committed to the massive territorial pieces, I think we're gonna have a hard time getting Ukraine there regardless. But good progress. Good conversation,
Conversation, yeah.
good con
Continue to talk.
continue to
Yeah.
talk, and for the US, Europe's actions and all the work they've been doing to try and put money behind it and get some sort of aggregate view, I think helps the US wanting to go into it because this administration is not going to be willing to be the supporter of a forever war. I have a real hard time with believing that Putin is somehow gonna get rid of his aspirations, remembering that if this is such a strain on him, all he has to do is back off. It's
Right.
his war, it's his action, it's his aggression that is driving this. If he was really interested in pulling back, he could pull back in advance of anything else. So the fact that he doesn't do that and just doctrinally what he says and does historically makes me, less than hopeful, but I do like the work. I do like the
Yeah.
work.
Yeah. Not coincidental at all
Right.
that the surge in attacks, especially in Kyiv proper, and the volume increases around these talks, or as Zelensky announces he's going to Mar-a-Lago to meet with President Trump and
Yeah,
swinging through Canada.
it's messaging. I mean, now for Russia, what they're saying is don't be thinking that we're a pushover, right? We still have all this
Mhm.
power. We can still do this. So, well, let's not be totally Debbie Downers on this. But what you need to see next, there are things that we need to see next in order to really have any sort of confidence that things are going to be happening. If they get an agreed to peace plan, then one of the things you have to do is you have to see battlefield activity slowing.
Mhm.
If you get a peace plan and you don't see battlefield activity slowing, then you don't really have a path to peace.
Right. Yep. Something that both participants can buy into,
Yep.
like we talked about with Israel, Gaza.
Yep.
Let's talk about another cold weather area in Greenland and the U.S. developments. We've got Denmark all fired up again. Last week, President Trump appointed Louisiana's Governor Jeff Landry as a special envoy to Greenland after reiterating that the U.S., quote, has to have Greenland for national protection. Denmark said it would summon the U.S. ambassador for an explanation. Landry, calling it a volunteer role, has been on board from the start. On January 9th on X, he posted that President Donald J. Trump is absolutely right. We need to ensure that Greenland joins the United States. Great for them, great for us. Let's get it done. He also said he'd work with Greenland to become part of the U.S., and the administration isn't going to go in there and try to conquer anybody or take over anybody's country. They're framing this approach as talking directly with the Greenlanders about what they want and what protection opportunities they feel they lack. I thought this one had gone away, but it does kind of fit with the 2025 national security strategy and the Trump corollary to the Monroe Doctrine, which says the U.S. will assert and enforce hemispheric primacy by keeping the Western Hemisphere free of hostile foreign incursion or ownership of key assets, and by ensuring U.S. access to key strategic locations. Arctic security competition is definitely not going away. But Sue, what does this say about our national interest versus our relationship with NATO ally Denmark, who actually controls Greenland?
National security is important. Geography matters with Russia's situation in the Arctic. Of course, you care about it. So, yay, that. When in the world did it happen that in order to achieve security outcomes, we needed to own the land? I mean, look at where we've had bases. Look at how long we have had partnerships and people
Hmm.
have spent money against it. So if we are unhappy or can imagine an advantage by using the geography, then I do it through partnership. I think this is ridiculous. I think it is akin to wanting Canada to be the 51st state or renaming the Gulf of Mexico the Gulf of America. It is this weird obsession with needing to have ownership and control rather than achieving outcomes in ways that are much more interesting. What are we gonna do with Greenland?
Add square footage.
Yeah, and what no, I'm massively anti this. I think it's an embarrassment. If you wanna have these conversations about national security, about investment by Denmark, about what the interests of Greenland are. If Greenland had this interest of wanting to be part of the United States, shouldn't they have initiated it? Just the intellectual dishonesty across the board. Then on the one hand, you have an administration that says, we don't want to go in and do regime change or democratize, country X, Y, or Z, but no, we want to own Greenland for our national security. It's not going away because it fits with this administration, but there is nothing about it that has been articulated that convinces me that this is either serious or necessary. And on some level, it's offensive and embarrasses me as a US citizen. But other than that, I'm pretty neutral on it.
Yeah. There's appointing a special envoy without giving them any hit. Wait, what? What are you doing?
If Greenland is central to some hole in US national security, then talk about that. Where is that in the budget? Where's the prioritization? How in the world has it not been a hole? What are the indicators that we think that our adversaries are gonna come trooping across the North Atlantic in longboats? I just stop it. Just stop it. I
Yeah. I
I
think we should lease, not buy.
Yeah, exactly. Partner, not
Yeah.
not possess. There we go.
Let's talk about the wind projects now. But the Trump administration last week paused or suspended federal leases for 5 major offshore wind projects under construction off the U.S.'s east coast, citing national security concerns that turbine blades and towers can create radar clutter that may interfere with military systems. The announcement jolted markets, and developers said the halt creates major uncertainty for projects that are already well underway. Officials said the pause is meant to give agencies time to work with developers and states on mitigation plans, while critics argue the projects have already gone through extensive federal reviews, including Department of Defense input. Not going to subject everyone here to radar theory. Turbines can still raise false alarms or reduce sensitivity in narrow slices of coverage, especially for low, slow, small objects in that direction. But because the interference is predictable, mapped, and local, it's usually something you design around rather than identifying as a fatal weakness. Operators can build clutter maps and processing rules that expect returns from those exact azimuths and range cells, and they can deweight or subtract them. Also, air defense isn't one individual radar in one direction, it's a network. So most of this drama is about specific legacy radars and specific geometries. I think in 2025 and 26, we are well equipped to work around that. Sue, do you think this is a 21st century Don Quixote problem? The giants are so real, we must fight the windmills? Or what does this say about everything being national security?
I don't think this is a physics problem. I hardly even think
Yeah.
it's a government governance and management problem. We know how to do this. I mean, we've done it with telecommunications interference with GPS and others usage when the advent of cellular communications. I mean, this is the idea of deconflicting participants in an environment that may cause various kinds of electromagnetic disturbances. This is not new. There's nothing new under the sun, and these windmills have been there and they're operating. I worry that there is just a kind of a platform element to it that we don't believe in climate, we don't believe in clean energy, and now we've come up with this cool reason called national security, where I can just put a kibosh on anything and not have to explain it further because national security is national security. And I think we're hearing that expansion of the term national security. Now, I'm guilty of it myself. I think economic security is national security. But when I say it, I'm talking about that these are real issues that matter to the resilience and the thriving of our nation that need to be addressed. And it's not just political military action. What feels like it happens with this administration labeling more and more things national security, whether that's narco-terrorism or fentanyl or wind turbines or space or even what information can be shared in courts.
Mhm.
What feels like they're doing is they're using the fact that national security has always been the ultimate trump card as the way that I'm just gonna play it. You don't get to know what's behind it because it's so important and so secret. And it feels like they're overusing it for that purpose to avoid transparency and dialogue by just using that moniker. So it may indeed have an issue of interfering with other national security missions, but those issues we have long known how to deal with, and so it feels like there's something else going on is a way to get rid of a project you don't like in the name of national security that used to be sacrosanct,
Mhm.
and now it feels like it's being used as a shield to be able to pursue whatever policy you want using that name.
Yeah, on the one hand, it's nice to have these things to talk about. If everything's identified as national
Yeah.
security, then we have a, plethora of information on this national security podcast to discuss. But I agree with you. If everything's national security and it's just getting that tag on it so you can bypass some of the scrutiny.
Right, so this is a great place for Congress if it were actually functioning in its oversight roles, because it did know how to have conversations of sensitive information and to make sure that all the elements of it when I talk about everything being national security, what I mean is it matters to us what technologies we protect.
Mm,
It matters to us whether we have a reasonable digital currency. Matters to us whether our localities are resilient from a weather perspective. That's what I say when I mean national security. This feels something much more as a lever to not have to reveal what's behind the trades you're making.
Well, 2026, the bell will toll for thee, Congress. There's going to be accountability, at least in the House of Representatives, or should be, when we go to the booths in November. Do you have any predictions for the upcoming year? Things you think will happen or won't happen, or some hot takes?
I have 3. Number 1 is, the first big AI mishap is not gonna be identified as AI. It's gonna be identified as human error or something else, and it will feel like it's a known problem. But I'm telling you that this idea that we don't have our algorithms are coming along, we don't have the accountability piece worked out at all. So I think the
No.
speed at which AI is moving, the numbers of things in which it's already involved. And again, I'm an AI boomer. I mean, I think it can do amazing things. I love the idea of what combination of AI and robotics are going to be able to do for us. But I'm telling you that we are moving so fast that the algorithms are outpacing the accountability and we're going to see an AI event, but it's not going to be called an AI event. So that's one. Let's see. What else do I have? It's kind of related to that. Human in the loop as a phrase is going to become the new age, either public private partnership or horrifyingly thoughts and prayers. In other words, people are going to say human in the loop, but they're not really going to do anything about it. And part of it is by the time humans are officially in the loop has already been closed.
Hmm.
And so we are not doing nearly enough work on the human machine rate. And it's back to almost the theme of this whole episode, which is technology moving faster than governance. And with all the AI and automated systems going on, this is going to really come and grab us in some pretty catastrophic ways. So that's two is human in the loop will be something everyone says and no one's working. And the question will be whether a human was present will be able to say that, but were they there to decide or just to absorb the blame? Interesting question. And then my last one is a little cheeky, but I'm trying to be it's one of my unsaid resolutions. I think sometimes I'm too serious. Um, but 20 by the end of 2026, the word unprecedented will quietly retire. Not because things are gonna calm down, but because surprise stops being the problem.
Mm.
We haven't done the work on pattern recognition, and so preparedness becomes the test. And so unprecedented just won't we just won't use it because it isn't the event. It's whether we've done the work. So my theme of all three is it isn't the technology, it's the responsibility. Who decides, who delegates, and who is accountable when systems move faster than people. And that's really kind of what our understandable insight lens is about is trying to take these things that seem to be about one thing and try and illuminate what is in one way of saying what's really going on or what's really going to matter and to give the signals of whether those things are happening. So those are my predictions.
Sounds like you're a little worried about the AI takeover and AI becoming self-aware.
Well, I did just start watching Pluribus. Is anyone watching that on Apple?
Is it good?
It's horrifying and and fascinating at the same time. It's basically, woman's fight because, there is a truth about AI, and you notice it even if anyone who uses ChatGPT, if you're nice to it, it's gonna be nice to you, and it wants to make everything happy, and it wants to make it good, and it's gonna tell you you're wonderful, and your thinking's great, and at some point, we're becoming kinda least common denominatory, right? And so Pluribus is about that kinda happens on a global scale, and one woman is the person who's responsible for solving this problem. It's fascinating so far. Do I put it in the
Alright.
category of Severance? I don't know, but might be worth a watch, and it's kind of on my theme about it's just about how fast decisions can be made and whether we are going to have the ability to be involved in that decision. And if we're not, we better get more involved in how the algorithms are deciding.
Right. Yeah. Not gonna hold the machine accountable,
Yeah.
right, as the person.
Yep.
My predictions, I think we're gonna see this deflation in the economy. I think this circular financing is finally gonna catch up to us. I don't know there's gonna be a precipice event, but I think we're due for a significant correction in the markets, and I think that's gonna happen next year. I think we're gonna have kinetic action in Venezuela. I don't know how big it's gonna be, but I think there will be something. There's too much massing of firepower and forces, and I think it'll come to a head. And I think we'll also this time next year still be talking about the high north. I'm gonna dust off an old prediction I had early on in this series of NATO leadership, one of the cold weather hardy countries, Norway, Finland, Sweden, or maybe Denmark, stepping up and taking over some leadership in a bigger role in NATO. And I think as we talk about the Arctic and the high north and that potential vulnerability, I think we'll see some new leadership there.
I like it. I like all that. How about what we're watching?
Yeah, so in the short term, I think Nigeria is a good one to keep an eye on and kind of what we're doing. The reports from Christmas Day, that they hit some targets in the Sokoto state tied to ISIS-linked elements and the Lakurawa group. Nigeria was involved. They requested these strikes and it's publicly pushing back on the narrative that it was to protect Christians specifically, warning that it's a multi-religious fight against terrorism. So there's Tomahawk missiles that we launched run between $2 to $3 million per missile off of this destroyer. I don't quite see the value of the target to weapons match here, but what were your thoughts on Nigeria?
Yeah, I think we ought to talk about it further. It feels I hate using this term when human lives are involved, but it does feel a little performative. In other words, the challenges in Nigeria and with what's going on in the Sahel, who the factions are, even within Nigeria, when you say Nigeria, ask for it, what part, what leaders? The Christian leadership, the
Right.
Muslim I mean, this is a very super complex environment. I don't think that anyone who has looked at this region really said that it was the targeting of Christians that was the dominant factor
Mhm.
in these actions. So it feels like it's covering up a much more complex issue. And I just want to mention that in the first Trump administration, we pulled out and we weren't there. So it just feels like a mismatch between an action, a rationale, our history, and the complexity of the situation. It doesn't feel like it's really a counterterrorism thing. And it doesn't feel
Right.
like on the ground facts support the avenging actions on Christians. So I don't know. It feels a little bit like one of those actions. It's a bit of a one-off that's used as almost a marketing tool. What I'm watching, and I think we could almost do a whole segment on this is the brouhaha between the US and Europe over free speech and
Mhm.
the fact that we are banning some European tech leaders because and there are two views on this that are really clashing. Europe's view is that, yes, it's free speech, but it isn't absolute, and the US is, we don't want Europe deciding what our tech companies can do and what they can do on their platforms, which has some reasonableness to it too. But again, this is a much bigger play. It is not I'm not even sure where the US stands on free speech. I'm not sure where this administration stands on free speech. It's free speech if it's the speech I like, but if it's not the speech I like, that should be banned. Well, isn't that a little bit
Mhm.
what Europe is saying? So I think this is a space worth watching because number one, there are real truths on both sides of the argument, and it has real potential to affect international movement of information and trade and everything that goes with it. So watch this space. And this is one where there really are competing views that are smashing up against each other. And the question is the resolution going to be along political dogmatic lines, or is it going to say, no, this is a reality? We are really struggling with what is supported speech on
Mhm.
national platforms. So I think it looks like a one-off, but of the things I see, this is one that has some real legs in terms of getting into it.
Yeah. What about for the show next year? Where do you think we're gonna go with this?
You and I have talked about several things. We wanna bring more guests on.
Mhm.
We're talking about going across platforms and doing some this way and doing some on Substack Live and kinda getting some cross things there. So that's one, is just expanding who we bring to you and the perspectives that we have. We are trying to, and you heard us talk about it a lot today, make sure that what we're bringing you is kind of what what we understand from our background that might be missing in the common dialogue on any issue. So we want, just continue to be focused to make sure that it's obvious why we're talking about these issues, even though you and I could talk about anything. And then the third is, I think the most exciting, and I'll let you talk about it, is trying to figure out we live in this great town called Austin, in this great
Mhm.
state called Texas, that is a real focus of a lot of intersection between national priorities and local priorities. we think that this construct done in a live setting, we could get some really great interactions.
Definitely looking for some live events. I think it's a good opportunity. And then also to be the user interface,
Yep.
right? The understandable insights, the UI for national security for folks. And you've alluded to this before. As we come into an election year, really highlighting in some either special episodes or as a through line, what questions we will be asking of our politicians as we're going to the booths in Central Texas, but also nationally. And some of those conversations we think we should be having and why these big global national security issues, how they directly impact you and your local environment.
And I think the last one is, Eric, we would love it if we could even inspire and come up with ways that you can give us more the people who listen, give us more feedback.
Yeah.
We're trying to be pretty aggressive about the positions we say. We would love it if you think we're swinging and missing or double down on what we
Hmm.
have. And so we want the opportunity for you to be more interactive with us in an easier way so that we can make sure that we're hitting. Plus, it'll be fun. And maybe our live events will help us learn how to do that even better. Yeah. So modest goals, Eric. I think we got to end this episode because we have work to do.
It'd be easier than putting nuclear reactors on the moon.
Don't get we gracefully exited me from that topic. Let's not bring me back. Let's be kind
It
to our
is.
listeners.
All right. Well, then that's what we're watching. Thank you for joining us, and no doubt there's more to come. This country's strength isn't in its power, industry, or government, but in its people.
So remember, we're here for you. We love doing this. We love the feedback anytime we get it. We believe in America, in its people, and in this moment. And so stay with us, drive us to be good, because we're trying to do the same. Go forth, be good, and for goodness sakes, take care of one another.